When I was approached by Amazfit to test out their T-Rex 3 watch, I was a little skeptical. I've been a pretty solid member of the iOS ecosystem for a few years now, and now that I've been wearing this thing for about a month, I can say unequivocally, it does literally everything better than the watch I was wearing before. I was really grumpy about my lack of battery life on my watch. This thing lasts 27 days. Did you hear what I just said right there? This watch will last 27 days. It connects to iOS. It connects to Android. It has 25 strength training movements and 8 sports movements. It'll track your pickleball games. It'll track your calories as you are wearing it. It's got so many health-related functions, I can't even go into it on this particular ad. But you guys should definitely check out the T-Rex 3 by Amazfit. That is us.amazfit.com, amazfit.com/402p. You get 15% off of your T-Rex 3 by using the promo code 402p. And that, again, is at us.amazfit.com. It is now my favorite sports watch.
Craven the hunter, who uses all the methods of the animals.
This Thursday.
Once you're on his list, there's only one way off.
Are you like your father?
He puts evil into the world. I get rid of people like him.
Who's next?
Witness the making of a new Marvel villain.
You think you have some kind of honor? You're a criminal, just like our father.
Aaron Taylor Johnson is Craven the Hunter. Rated R. Under 17 on admitted without parent. In theaters Thursday.
Welcome to 4.0 to Pro, the pickleball podcast that focuses on a single shot, tip, or strategy to improve your pickleball game with every single pocket-sized episode. Our goal is to make you better on the court every time you hear our voices.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 4.0 to Pro, your pocket-sized pickleball podcast, where we teach you a single shot or strategy every single episode. I'm Michael O'Neal here in Long Beach, California, joined by Mircea Morariu there in Boca Raton, Florida. What's up, dude?
How you doing, my friend?
Great, man. I did not get to San Clemente, which is where the PPA is right now. I usually do.
Yeah, there's some exciting matches there.
I know. I was out of town in Denver for the week for Thanksgiving week here in 2024. And huge shout out to Heidi Gurley at the Parker Lifetime Fitness, who was nice enough to host me, I want to say like 4 or 5 times to play with their groups. It was fantastic. I will say though, dude, the altitude from a lung standpoint is certainly no joke, but from a playing standpoint is so crazy because it's like I had to serve from 5 feet behind the baseline just to keep the ball in. Uh-huh. I couldn't get the ball to dip the way I expected it to. And all the timing was weird, even on a couple of overheads where I topped the ball, meaning the ball didn't drop as quickly as I expected it to. So I hit it with the very top of my paddle and it went 300 feet in the air. All that happens because of altitude.
Yeah, well, imagine coming from Florida to that. You at least get a chance to come from California where you already have dry weather. The dry weather is kind of the analogy from you going to Colorado. It's the analogy for me going to California. That's what I feel like. And then when I go to Colorado, it's double that because you have the dry air and then you have the altitude.
Well, it took me a solid probably 4 or 5 outings to finally get my timing and rhythm correct. And it dawned on me that if I do that again, I need to start the week with like a 2-hour drill session just to get my timing right. And I think that's probably the lesson here is that when you go to a new place, whether it's Florida or California or Colorado or wherever, if you can start with drilling, if you have a tournament or something, at least you can get your game under your legs. But special shout out to Heidi. Thank you so much for hosting me. And it was really fun to meet everybody. So today, Mircea, I have been going through a bit of self-evaluation on the court, as I think a lot of people that are students of the game do. And it dawned on me that one of the more difficult things to do in pickleball is to self-evaluate your own weaknesses, especially if there's some ego involved. I don't know, maybe not everybody wants to hear that they're weak in a certain area, but I thought it would be kind of cool if you and I broke down certain ways that you can self-improve and recognize where your weaknesses are so you can obviously work on them.
It's a great topic and it's really important if you really want to get better. We all have strengths and weaknesses and we really need to recognize those in order to improve. We don't want to ignore our strengths, and we definitely don't want to ignore our weaknesses. Those are things that we're uncomfortable doing. And like many parts of life, when things are uncomfortable, people don't like that. And if you focus on the uncomfortable aspects of your game, and you make those better, not only is it going to elevate your game overall to the next level, but you'll be so much more comfortable in a bunch of different scenarios.
I think it's easier to exemplify your strengths in a game than it is to minimize your weaknesses. For instance, my drive was on yesterday. It felt really good. My third shot drive, sometimes fifth shot drive. And it's easy to say, hey, let's steer the game around that because we're getting really short fifths. So let me take these forehands and, go that route versus, man, I can't hit a backhand dink or a backhand drop today. So let's try to steer around that and shift. It just feels like it's easier to highlight the strengths than it is to highlight the weaknesses.
For sure. You definitely want to gravitate to your strengths because those are the easiest things, and if they're working well. One thing I would reframe is what you said about I can't hit a drop today. And this is, again, a mindset, and it's a reframing of a concept. And what I would say is if you're missing a drop, okay, I missed that drop, or I hit the drop in the net, don't tell yourself that, oh, I can't hit this shot today. I'm not good today, or I'm not good. Give yourself some grace. And this is really important, not only in rec play, not only in drilling, but especially in a competitive match. Give yourself some grace. Give your partner some grace. We all make mistakes. We all hit stupid shots. We've all had stupid speed ups. I was watching yesterday some of the pro players at the PPA. There were a bunch of unforced errors, a bunch of ill-advised speed ups. Everyone does it. So don't be so hard on yourself by telling yourself, I suck. I played with a guy last week and he was having a rough time. And he kept saying, I can't hit a ball today. I suck today. And I just kept saying, hey, bro, you got this. You're a good player. Let's focus on our feet. We're right in the match. Let's do this. We implemented a strategy. And part of what he was struggling with it, he kept hitting the opponents shots that they wanted. So they were putting a lot of pressure on him. They were targeting him. I got him, one, to reframe how he was thinking in terms of his attitude towards himself. And then two, I got him to hit balls to the players' less offensive shots. So they were able to hit more defensive shots rather than offensive shots. And that simple concept and recognition turned around the match.
Can I ask you how you delivered that information? Because that's something I think we face a lot on court, and we're going to get back to this topic in a second. But I really like that you approached him and were able to identify that he's hitting to these offensive shots. Let's give them something they don't want. How did you actually deliver that information to him without damaging ego, which I think is what happens a lot on court? Sometimes your partner's doing something over and over and over that you go, man, if he would just not do that, that would be so much better. But it's hard sometimes to deliver that without getting to some sort of partner tiff, especially in the middle of rec play.
I picked out the guy that had the weaker backhand. I said, hey, listen, hey, he wants forehands. Let's hit it to his backhand. As we're walking to the baseline or right before I'm serving, say, hey, if you're going to drive it to this guy's backhand.
Got it.
Very brief. So basically, I focused on, number one, trying to reframe his mindset to keep him positive. And number two is targeting very briefly the weaknesses or safe zones for the other team. So I'd just say, hey, when we're dinking, let's dink outside. Or if they switched, I'd say, hey, let's try dinking inside. Let's try to keep it to their backhands or forehands or whatever.
Well, let's get into this actual topic because it has a lot to do with what we're talking about, which is recognizing our weaknesses. If this guy wasn't able to recognize that the shot he was hitting was punishing you guys on the other end, you were able, as an objective viewer, to be like, man, we keep going back to that well, and that well is not paying us off.
Exactly.
So this brings in a couple things that have to do with ego. And if you're listening to the show, you're probably a student of the game. You're probably trying to get better at pickleball every time you step on the court, which presumably is what this show is about. So I think the first thing we have to talk about is being coachable and putting ego aside. I think I struggle a little bit sometimes because I'm always very well-intentioned when I see somebody making a mistake, and I'll say, hey, whatever, if you tried this, I'll bet you your drop would get more consistent if you took a lot of wrist and elbow out of it or whatever. But not everybody is, first of all, unsolicited coaching, which I do probably all way too much, is not always welcomed because not everybody is a student of the game. They're not ready for such things. I enjoy it. When someone says, this is what we're attacking on you because of X, I go, ooh, I got to work on X. I don't take it at all like that. But I think it's only because I've been an athlete forever. Not everybody who plays pickleball is used to being coached. So because I think it's sometimes perceived as criticism, it's not criticism. This is coaching. This is how you get better at a thing. And I think we all run into these people that even if we're drilling and we recognize something and we say, hey, XYZ, they don't do it for whatever reason, because it feels to me like there's a bit of ego involved.
Yeah, there always is. I mean, we all have that. We all have the ego. We all, think we're better than we are. It's really key to keep your mind open and to be open to feedback. Because if you're not open to it, and if you're talking to someone that's not open to it, it's not going to go very well. And I always tell people when I'm trying to coach them, and this came up a lot in the book of Picklers this season, I told them I've made the same mistake a million times. And I've learned from repeatedly making that mistake. And I'm trying to give you my knowledge and experience to try to help you not make the same mistake that I've made a million times. So whenever I tell you something, it's really to try to make you better and try to make us better as a team. And if I don't say it the right way, please just give me a little bit of grace in terms of how I'm saying it. I'm really trying to do my best. That's something that I needed to work on, was to keep things positive. And it worked out amazingly.
When you have that kind of dynamic as a team manager, is there an expectation that you're going to be coaching that team? Like everyone who's drafted, are you looking at them as students? I mean, obviously you're playing along with them. Do they have an expectation that you might pull them aside and say, XYZ with this particular shot?
There definitely was. And one of the things that I needed to do was not overcoach. At the beginning, I overcoached, which hurt me more than it did them because I wasn't concentrating on my own matches. What I needed to do was not give them too much to focus on. So I needed to pare it down. And Kara Williams, my co-captain, I told her that, hey, listen, I need you to tell me when to shut up. And I was totally open to that. So I needed her to give me feedback. And this is also really important. When you have a coach or a partner that you're trying to get feedback from, you also have to give them feedback. So when I coach, I tell people, listen, I'm trying to help you, and this is when I'm trying to give you some advice. But I need you to tell me if you don't understand it or it doesn't make sense to you. And if a particular strategy doesn't make sense to you, tell me why.
Yeah, that's on you, the coach.
Perhaps I'm telling you something that you can't do or you don't understand, which is all good. And that's part of the communication. We have a running theme of communication. And that's the key, is open, honest, and direct communication, both in life, your relationships, and also in coaching. And whether you're the coach or the pupil or it's your partner, the more open, honest, and direct you are in a respectful fashion, the better your connection is going to be as a team and the better your relationships are.
There are 4 ways that you and I have identified that you can recognize your weaknesses. We've got self-evaluation. We've got film study, meaning you're recording these games you play. We've got asking a friend, which I thought was really cool. This was yours. And then we've got, of course, coaching. So self-evaluation, there's a couple things about this. Number 1, do you have a shot that you miss consistently? And why are you missing it? And I have my own shot. There's a low backhand volley if I'm in the middle of the transition zone. And even if I'm on the left-hand side and I get a sort of a volley dink on the left-hand side with my backhand, if it's low, since the very beginning I started playing pickleball, I would start pulling up on that shot and trying to move back to middle before my shot was completed. And sometimes before the ball even hit my paddle. I was so focused, or am so focused on getting back to the correct position to counter if I happen to hit a high ball and I have a forehand to counter with in the middle, that I miss the shot itself. It's like an NFL receiver scoring the touchdown before they've caught the ball. It happens all the time. And we talk about stable base and we talk about split step and staying low and watching that ball hit the paddle. I still don't do it. I still pull up on it 30% of the time, and I can shank that shot and I shank it right into the net. And I go, dude, this is the same thing you've done now. For whatever reason, I haven't been able to drill it out of my head, but it's something that I definitely recognize.
Well, number 1, you recognize it, which is key. A lot of people don't recognize their own weaknesses. So whenever you have something that you're uncomfortable doing or you can't do consistently, that's a weakness. So that's something you have to recognize. In terms of drilling it, there may be a bunch of different reasons you're doing it. Maybe your elbow is too close to your body. Maybe your elbow is too far out. Maybe you're not split stepping the way you think you are. Maybe you're not shuffling your feet and you're more on your heels. There are all these different factors. So one thing that you need to do is you need to have some sort of external evaluation, which we're going to talk about next.
That's a good point, is that sometimes there are physical limitations to why you're missing a shot. Like I've had a few knee surgeries, and that first 2 games for me are literally actually physically painful. Before I get enough blood flow into my legs and they start feeling fine the rest of the day, I made that Everything Hurts shirt, which is available at our store, makeemhit.com, for a reason. I'll get to the courts and be like, whew, these knees are barking this morning. And I think that's just being 53, but it's also having 5 left knee surgeries. And sometimes the weather's cold and all the things that happen when you get older.
That's one of the tough things about having surgery is that you can't go back. You can't be unsurgerized.
No, and I couldn't just tie a bow on my ACL. It was gone, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But
so someone told me once that once a pickle, always a pickle. You can't unpickle a pickle.
That's very true. So recognizing that for me, I might even say, I haven't done this, but I might say I'm going to be a little better on the right-hand side for the first couple of games because I can't backhand dink very well on that left knee right away. So I might stay on the right side. This is like if I was playing a tournament or if I didn't have enough time to like properly warm up, which has never happened. But let's say it did. Let's say I was late to a tournament and I was playing with someone. I said, dude, my legs are killing right now. I need a couple minutes on the right side so I don't have to get low on my backhand side. That is something that I could self-evaluate and say, until the Tylenol kicks in, I got to play on the right side. You know what I mean?
But listen, this is something that you can address. Let's just use the simple example of playing right or left. I had a gentleman come down and train with me from South Carolina the last couple of days, and he's much more comfortable on the left. And it was clear when I was drilling with him. And I said to him, hey, listen, I think you should play the right more. And he said, well, why? And I said, well, because that way you are going to be able to recognize patterns better. You're going to get yourself better. And you're not going to get better on the right by playing on the left. When you go out and you play rec games, if you want to win every rec game, you're going to be playing on the left. However, if you want to get better, spend a bunch of that time playing on the right, or at least half stacking where you spent part of the time on the right and get yourself better. So put yourself in those uncomfortable situations to help yourself get better.
It's funny because I love stand-up comedy, and a lot of times you hear some of these comics talk about their closing bit, and that is the thing that's the killer. That's their best bit. And to get better, sometimes they open with their closing bit just because it cauterizes the rest of the show, and they have to get better and better and better. But that's the same kind of concept of playing right side when you really want to play left. You, Mircea, are a big proponent of video recording your games for this exact reason. Film study is the second way that we can self-evaluate.
Yeah, I think it's really important. You can't watch yourself. That's why you really need some sort of external feedback, whether it's film study, whether it's asking a friend or a coach, we're going to talk about more. But watching yourself on video is really priceless. I don't like to do it. I don't like to watch myself play, but I kind of force myself to do it because I need to know where I'm in the court, what I'm doing that's working, what I'm doing that's not working. Should I be in a different spot? And it's really helpful to do it with a partner. If you have a partner that you play regularly with, that you're going to compete with, it's amazing what you see when you film yourselves. And it's really a nice perspective because when you're on the court, you might have sped up a ball and your partner wasn't there and it went through the middle, and you might think, wow, that was really their ball. And they might think, wow, that was the other person's ball. And then you watch it on film and you can decide. Now, sometimes you might not figure it out, but at least you'll see, okay, where was I on the court? And it's not just incredibly helpful to watch yourself play. It's also incredibly helpful to watch other players play and see where their positioning is, how they're speeding things up, where their hips are, just even watching their footwork. One of the things I just highly, highly recommend people is watching pro matches and focus on one player and look at their footwork. And we talked about it before. Annalie Waters has incredible footwork. JW Johnson has incredible footwork. There's so many players that you can use and emulate by just watching them play and watching a specific part of their game.
There's a girl in Denver, I think her name was Haley, who had Annalie Waters-esque footwork. And I was like, I want to marry your footwork. Can I? It's so good. She was hitting from every shot she hit was so stable. It was just amazing to watch. And I said, if anybody wants to study Just study that because it's absolutely incredible. Maybe it could have been Katie. It was Katie or Haley, one of the two. But either way, awesome footwork if you happen to listen to the show. Do you use any apps when you film? I really like Swing Vision. If you've never experimented with that, Swing Vision is very cool because not only does it show you the location of where the ball lands, like you can actually do line calls, but it eliminates all the time between points automatically. As it processes a game, it goes serve, point ends, and then next serve. So you don't see all that 45 seconds between serves and the banter and the ball was a ball on. You don't see any of that. It automatically edits all that stuff. I don't know how it does it. Maybe AI, but it's very cool.
Yeah, it's AI.
Is it? So Swing Vision is a pretty cool app. They're not sponsored or anything, but I do think it's pretty cool. I think their Pickleball app came out about a year ago. It was like December 2023. And I think it does a pretty good job. Do you have any apps or any methodologies to watching your film?
I've used that, but generally I just record them and watch them myself, and I can go back and forth a little bit more easily for me. It's a little bit easier for me to just video on my phone. I mean, you really don't need any fancy equipment other than a stand that's flexible ideally, so you can put it on the fence or wherever, and then just analyze them yourself. Or even better, get a good coach or a good experienced friend or perhaps a better player, which kind of goes into our next topic that will help you analyze your own strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I think a really good idea, this is something that you discussed before we recorded today, was asking a good friend. We typically have one or two people that we play with that are a very similar skill level. We can drill together. Very often we play together. We know each other's games a little bit. Asking that person, hey, how would you play me? What do you do when you're on the other side of the net from me? What are the weaknesses you see? I'll tell you, man, this is something that you really have to put the ego aside because they're your friend, and you hope that they're going to be objective, and you hope that they're good enough to understand the scope of the game. And I think that is important in this respect. If you're a 3-5 player, an early 4-0 type player, and you're playing with someone along those lines, they may not know the answer to this. They may not be at a point in their game where they can recognize weakness yet. They might just be working on their own shots and getting it together. But I think once you get to that 4-5 plus level, we're pretty good at evaluating, like starting to recognize what other players' weaknesses are, because you have to target them. There's no other way to win other than to have a little bit of strategy around that kind of thing, because most of us have most of the shots. So I think being able to have that friend that you can trust enough to give you the feedback is pretty paramount to this. And I thought it was a really cool idea that you had.
Yeah, you obviously are out there playing, you're playing rec games, you have friends that you play regularly or you see regularly. They become familiar with your game, and they often have really good insight about what kind of things that you need to work on if you choose to seek that out. If they don't spontaneously tell you, hey, I think you're doing this, ask them. Put aside your ego, become open to feedback, and ask a bunch of them. And some of them might have great advice. Some of them may not have great advice. It can be a little bit of a potpourri, but the more feedback you get, the better you're able to improve your own game and analyze your own game.
Sometimes they'll tell you without telling you, meaning if you're in the course of a game, you start seeing the same shot over and over again to the same spot over and over again. They're telling you they recognize that as a weakness. And I've seen that a couple of times. I've seen that, all of a sudden people start driving to me and I think, am I giving them something on this drive that is an easy next shot? Thankfully, I consider myself savvy enough to go, okay, if they think that this is going to be a thing, I'm going to go this way with it. And I'll typically try to negate whatever that advantage was. And if they stop feeding you that ball, that means that you did it. That's sort of the in-game strategy. But they told you they saw this as a weakness, and you've been able to counter it during the course of the game, which I think is a high-level chess match.
Exactly. And a little bit on this topic, when you're drilling with someone and you ask for some feedback, it can be really helpful as well, because if you're drilling something without any feedback, and say you have a perceived weakness, your backhand dink, and you have a drill session where you get in a groove and you're hitting a good backhand dink, yet your technique is faulty. You can get into a groove and hit it well while you're drilling, and you think, okay, I'm making progress. I can hit 20, 30 dinks with my backhand now. And then you get into a game and it breaks down because your technique is faulty and you don't really want any feedback on your technique because you're not open to it. because you have an ego or you just think you're doing great by just drilling. Just because you're drilling and you get a consistent shot to get to where you want it to go, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're drilling effectively.
I love this concept of you start warming up, you're just about to start your drilling session, and you say to your drilling partner, hey, if you see something, say something. This is New York City.
Exactly.
You see something, say something. If you see that I'm making a shot, this reminds me of this coaching session I had with the ladies a few weeks ago. They never get to a dink because they're in the middle of the transition zone. They rip the ball across the court at the returners that are already at the net, and they win the point because the returners, the girls at the net, didn't know how to handle a drive. They were hitting way high balls or they were shanking off their paddles. So the people that are coming in think, oh, good, I'm supposed to hit a 7th shot drive at full speed from the middle of the transition zone. And you go, no. You didn't win that point because you hit the correct shot. You won the point because the person on the other side of the net doesn't know how to deal with a drive. That has nothing to do with you or your technique. So they bring that into a real game against good players who are yawning as they are putting these balls away that they're being fed shoulder high drives. So when you're in a drill session, you first get there. I love the idea of saying, hey, for whatever we do today, if you see something I'm doing that's wrong, please say something. Whether it's my technique or my target or whatever, like if you recognize something, please tell me so I can improve on it.
Yep, absolutely.
We've got a final phase here of recognizing your own weaknesses, which is the obvious one, which is coaching. You just mentioned that you had a guy that came down from South Carolina for a few days to coach with you. Obviously, there's no better way to get better than that.
Yeah, I had a very nice gentleman that happened to be Romanian, a fellow former countryman, come down and train with me yesterday and today. And having a coach, honestly, and thoroughly evaluate your game overall for a couple days can be just invaluable. That he was struggling with in terms of weaknesses and things he wanted to try to work on. He didn't know why he was having those issues. And it was really my job to figure out why he was having trouble defending. And some of it was simple, some of it was more complex. Some of the more simple things was that he just kept backing up when he was defending. And so what he would be doing is leaning backwards. And one of the simplest things that he was able to adjust to was he was able to maintain a more stable base. He would back up a little bit, yet he would maintain that neutrality or leaning forward or that wider base. And that was one of the simplest adjustments that we were able to make that dramatically improved his game, even in 2 days. So he just didn't recognize that his base was too narrow. He was keeping his feet too close together. So I just made the adjustment. If you're going to back up, just split step, have a little bit of a wider base, have your knees bent, and there your torso is either neutral or forward, and defend that way. Because if you keep backing up, what was happening that he kept hitting the ball in the net, or he kept popping it up because he's leaning backwards. So it was a very simple adjustment, but no one had ever told him, and he just needed someone to point it out. But that was just one example. So if you have a qualified coach that you have access to, and you don't even have to go 5 times a week, you can just get a coach for a couple days, have them give you a program, have them tell you what you need to work on. And it's really ultimately up to you. It's your own responsibility to get better. It's not the coach's responsibility for you to get better. You need to take ownership and you need to take the feedback and try to implement the plan and work to get better. There's no one else that's going to get you better but yourself.
Yeah, I'm so lucky to be at Los Cab in Southern California because we have a million great coaches, but also all the pros train there. We have so many pros that are there on the way into the San Clemente PPA. We'll have 3 courts of top tier pros. Really great to sit and be able to watch. Oh, that's what you do in that situation. That's really good. You're in the same boat in Boca. You got a bunch of top tier pros around you. So that's super helpful. But man, nothing like having a coach that knows your game. And certainly the longer you work with one, the better. Now, not all coaches are created equal. And sometimes some are better at recognizing your skills than others and redirecting you. And I didn't mean to do this, Mircea, but it's a great time to announce that you and I are discussing these clinics, finally, 4.0 to Pro clinics on the East Coast and maybe even East Coast and West Coast, early 2025. So we don't have full details or any details about them yet. But I will say that if you are interested in having a little clinic, maybe a 3-day thing with us, please email 40 to Pro, and that's FOUROHTOPRO 4.0to-pro@gmail.com, or reach out on Instagram at 4.0, the number 4.0 to pro. And we'll get you on an initial list. You can also go to picklehelp.com, which is obviously way easier than what I just said, but go to picklehelp.com and just write that you are interested. I'll put a list together, and then when we get this all detailed out and work it out amongst ourselves, timing and pricing and location, all that stuff, you guys will be the first one to get emailed. But that should be pretty fun, don't you think, Mircea?
It's going to be a blast. Nothing I love more than helping people get better. It's one of the most rewarding things, seeing people implement concepts that you discuss and just feeling more and more comfortable. I can't tell you how great it is to see someone just have more joy and enjoyment, and to be able to fuel someone's competitive spirit where they're elevating their game. It's just one of the great things about pickleball, and I love to do it.
To me, it's almost on par with winning. It's when you watch somebody that you have helped improve. A great example is this women's group. Nobody was ever dropping. Everyone was just ripping these mid-transition drives, and they were hitting the fence or they were hitting the net. And I was literally throwing a Frisbee to my dog the other day, and one of the girls was there, and I saw a gorgeous drop that she then followed up and put away in the middle. And I was like, I threw the touchdown sign because yes, that was it right there. She never did that before. So that was super cool. And yes, it's very much along the lines of why we do this. So I hope you guys are able to self-evaluate, improve your game, ask your friend, put your ego aside. Let's keep getting better and keep rocking on the court. You have now just listened to another episode of 4.0 to Pro. As always, hey, give us a like on Instagram. And if you haven't before, we love the reviews on the podcast apps. So if you can go to Spotify or you can go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review of the show. It really helps. It doesn't cost you guys anything, but it really helps the show grow, because the more of those things that happen, the algorithm picks it up and then kind of throws it to the top of the pile, and that is always really good.
And we really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for paying attention, and we all want everyone to get better.
All right, let's go have some fun on the court. We'll talk to you guys next time. See you later.
Thank you for listening to 4.0 to Pro. For more tips, find us on Instagram at 4.0 to Pro. If you have a pickleball question, submit it at picklehelp.com. Now, get out there and dominate. But don't forget to have fun.